So hi everybody, this is Ron with Sandcar Services, and this is going to be take 4 because I'm just having a hard time trying to figure out how to say this without getting myself or somebody else in trouble. But this is Chris's transmission. I just finished it up, and when Chris brought this to me, this is the one that I posted that I said sounded like a box of rocks. Well, there was a good reason for it sounding like a box of rocks. It had a whole lot of gear problems. Everything inside the gear cluster had to be replaced. But here's the part that's heavy on my heart. All right. It's my job to post the facts as I know them. Okay. And when this transmission came in, it had a decal on it. I'm not going to go into it, and I'm probably going to turn off comments because I don't need this coming back on me sometime down the line. But I will tell you that this is becoming a major issue. You guys keep hearing me talk about these preload nuts being loose. When the customer dropped this transmission off, I did something I very, very rarely do. I let the customer stay and watch me open it up just so that we could find out what the major damage was. When I saw the sticker on the side of the transmission, I joked with the customer and I told him, I bet you dinner at Sizzler that the preload nut's going to come off my hand. Because nearly every transmission with that decal on it that I pull apart, that nut is loose. And the downfall is when this nut's loose, all of this stuff can get damaged because the preload on the pinion sets the pinion preload. It keeps it from moving. Literally your pinion, when that nut is loose, can chatter in the bearings. It can walk back and forth. And the bearing back here is just a needle bearing. The forward pinion bearing is just a needle bearing. So when that thing chatters, the back one chatters, all the gears start bouncing on each other, crazy stuff happens. But this transmission had even bigger issues. When it was assembled, it had to have been a 5 o'clock Friday one that we joke about, because this is not an accident. These are the bolts that hold the pinion carrier assembly into the case. There are 3 of them that the threads rolled over on. Now, thankfully, when I ran the tap through and then looked at it with a magnifying glass, the threads in the assembly weren't actually damaged that bad, so the threads rolled back on themselves. They didn't actually take the threads out of the housing. But then this is also the one that I posted on my Instagram, thanking the person that Loctited and over-torqued the 1/4-inch bolts that hold the flange drive bearing retainer plate on, because I had to break the welder out and weld a nut to one of them, and I had to extract the other 11 with an extraction tool, and that was after applying a torch to the things to melt the Loctite. Just totally uncalled for. So, but now that the rant's over with, Chris's transmission came out nice. It was just sad that every gear in the cluster was bad, 1st through 4th. Not only that, but when 1st gear, because the nut came loose, it allowed 1st gear to rattle back and forth, and this is actually an oiling surface right here. Rides on this part right here on the back of the 1-2 slider hub assembly, and when I went to go put it back together, I thought this was going to be okay. Turned out it was binding up the brand new 1st gear, so we ended up having to put a 1-2 slider hub in it. It's always fun to pull the shaft back apart to do that. But this thing, I ended up updating all of the bearings. All the plastic bearings got updated. This is the 3rd gear synchro. Was broken in 3 pieces when I pulled it apart. The side gears for the spiders were worn pretty heavily, so I put the new Weddell Racing spiders in it. And changed all the gears, put all new seals in it. Flange drive bearing was locked up on one side, was bad. And the other side, it was making noise really bad. So this transmission really had a lot of issues. And then at some point, it just left the chat. And he had to pull it out and bring it to me. And I'm thankful for everybody for supporting me and bringing me the work. I'm just hoping that these nuts start getting tight. 110 foot-pounds of torque, red Loctite, and peen these things really hard. I should not be able to spin these off by hand. And I can tell you, I joke with my buddy Ian Kirkland a lot because we both deal with the same thing all the time, you know, and it seems like everybody has their little quirk that they seem to be more responsible for. There's certain transmission shops that when I see the sticker on the side of it, I already know that I'm going to be fighting this, getting it off. Because not only is it torqued to 110 foot-pounds, but they got enough red thread lock on it that I basically have to melt the plastic bearing if it has one on the hub to be able to get them loose. And that's a good thing. You want this tight, right? So, guys, got to remember, let's discuss this for a second. This is a Volkswagen transmission. Yes, it's Mendeola 2D, but it is a Volkswagen transmission. It's the gear stack in this thing is the same design and size as an 091, except the gears are wider. So the reverse assembly is the same. You know, the shafts might be a little bit longer and stuff like that, but it's all the same basic geometry. And the shift jig for the 2D has the same spacing between the gear carrier here and the pinion housing as the 091 does. So there's not a lot of room to mess around with in there. It's one of the reasons why fourth gear is as narrow as it is, because there's just not enough room to put a wider fourth gear in. You know, they kept the fourth gear is the one that gets used the least in most cars, especially in the sand world. So you want first gear and second gear to be as wide as you can, because those are going to be the ones everybody's going to use. So thankful that Chris let me have this job, and hopefully this works out well for him, and the transmission gives him some years of service. So 1 gallon, 75 140 Maxima Pro Gear oil. Fill it until it's here. Any questions? Give me a holler.